This is Hydroplane 85, a year in review, and is brought to you by Ford and your local Ford dealer, and by the new Walker Advantage muffler. It puts rust at a disadvantage.
Hi everybody, I'm Don Poier along with Jim Hendrick. We're in San Diego, the last site for the 1985 Unlimited Hydroplane racing season. And what a year it has been, Jim.
It has been a year that the turbines have set the pace. Look out, 1986. More races, more turbine engines. One boat threatened to dominate it all, and we've had a lot of adjustments to make in the Thunderboat sport.
For the next hour, we're going to look back through 1985. What an incredible year it has been. So stay with us. Race number one in 1985 was down in Miami, Florida. It featured a new Miss Budweiser. It also featured some sponsor changes. Miller American went aboard with Lucero Muncie Racing Industries, formerly the Miss Atlas Van Lines, and 7-Eleven came aboard to sponsor Steve Woomer's turbine boat.
That's right, and the featuring of Miss Budweiser didn't actually happen because in testing the very first time on Lake Washington, the Budweiser pulled away from the dock. Jim Crofeld had an explosion behind him. That set the crew back. Then they had a long trek, and they didn't make it till race morning, did not qualify, but did test the very next day when nobody was there.
It was tough for the crew. They had to drive the boat from Seattle over 3,000 miles down to Miami for that first race of the season. And without the Budweiser racing, we had a field of 6 boats for Miami in 1985. A boat that many thought would do well was the Executone Telephones. It was probably the most prepared crew after testing all winter long. I'm with Scott Pierce, the driver of the Executone Telephones. And Scott, I would imagine next to a cheeseburger, the dearest thing to your heart was the one in Miami.
Well, it was a very, very special time in my life. You know, we've worked awful hard for many years, and we finally were able to get a good sponsor with Executone, a good crew, a good owner, a good boat. And we were able to go down there and put a win together, and it meant a lot to me. Of course, my father was in the sport for so many years, and he wasn't able to win. So it was a very emotional time, and I still get emotional when I think about it now. But it, you know, with all the things that have transpired during the year, it's a very, very nice time.
First win ever for Scott, and first win for Executone Telephones. Let's go back to Miami and the final. Very low right now in speed is the 7-Eleven to stay inside the gun. He just made it. A good start for the 7-Eleven. But in the meantime, on the inside is the Executone Telephones with Scotty Pierce. Going into the east turn, a better speed for the Executone Telephone. Scotty Pierce hit the start right on the button. A good high-speed open lane going into the east turn. In second place, 7-Eleven with Steve Reynolds. Third place, Leif Borgeson and the Kenny Toyota Volvo. Fourth place is Andy Coker in the American Speedy Printing. You can see him on the inside coming around the turn now past the exit buoy and down the back chute. Scott Pierce finds himself in first place in the finals here in Miami. And there is no sign of the Miller American. I don't see Chip Hanauer out on the course anywhere, so it's a 4-boat race here in the finals. And Scott Pierce steady ahead of Steve Reynolds. Third place, Kenny Toyota. And we're getting down to crunch time. Crunch time with the drivers, too. Very choppy in the east turn now as those 4 boats are kicking it up. And Steve Reynolds in the 7-Eleven is going dead in the water. Reynolds' day will come to an end in the east turn here at Marine Stadium. He had hoped to pick up where he left off, taking that victory in Houston in the last race of 1984, but this is where it'll end in 1985, and he'll have to wait until Syracuse next Sunday. Steve Reynolds waving that he's all right. Yeah, that says it all. For Scotty Pierce, 5 years of driving slower boats, doing everything, driving the truck, working on the engines. He is on his way to his first career victory in the Unlimiteds and the first victory for the sponsor, Executone Telephones, a winner in Miami.
Great field winner, baby!
Scotty, take your helmet off. You did it, young man. You did it. First ride in the Executone Telephones, and you already got yourself a championship here in Miami.
5 long years.
5 years for this program. You're right for Executone Telephones.
5 long years.
How did it feel out there?
Oh, it felt great. I was so happy I could cry.
Go ahead and cry. There's nothing wrong with that.
My dad, he's up there in heaven. I wouldn't be here without you.
and I love it. I just love it. My wife, she's done everything, supported me. We had no money. Now we have some money.
Personally, I think that was the most meaningful interview I've ever done in my life, Sky.
Well, it was a very, very meaningful moment to me. You know, we have a lot of highs and lows in life, and that was a definite high, and it's one I'll cherish for the rest of my life.
What about 1986?
Well, as everyone I think knows at this point, we're going to repower with turbine engines. It seems to be the wave of the future, and we're very excited about it. And we want to continue to keep Executone in the front of an unlimited hydroplane racing.
Okay, Scotty Pierce. Jim?
Bernie Little and Budweiser always trying to better the sport, and they've had a lot of innovations. It had to hurt not to be competing in your own hometown race, Miami.
Yes, Jim, we really felt bad about not making the Miami race. However, we went on to win the next race at Syracuse, and that was really something for us, since we really spent the whole year for safety. And for us to win that race was really something. But we knew we couldn't compete too strong this year with the competition, with the turbine 4,000 horsepower. So we dedicated 1985 to keeping our driver alive. Hopefully the other drivers in the other camps will see the closed-in cockpit, and I think it'll really work and do something for the sport.
Thank you, Bernie. Don?
Jim, in this week's show, we're looking back, asking the principals in the Unlimiteds what they remember most of 1985, their most memorable moment. Scott Pierce.
Well, the most memorable moment in my year for 1985 was about January 2nd when I signed a contract with Executone, and finally, after 4 long, hard years, I knew that I was with a competitive program and a competitive company, and I felt that we could go out and do some good in '85, and I feel that we've done that.
Welcome back to our look at 1985 in the world of unlimited hydroplane racing. The second stop, Syracuse, New York.
And the boats, of course, having run the first race at Miami and saltwater, welcomed the fresh water of Onondaga Lake.
It was a tough trek, though, for the crews. They had to go from Miami to Syracuse, New York in less than a week. And as if the travel wasn't enough, the Miller American crew again suffered engine damage, this time severe damage to the boat as well. Jim Hendrick reminisces with co-owner Jim Lucero.
A great year, Jim Lucero, for your team, but Syracuse was no indication that it would be a good year.
You know, starting out the season in Miami, being a saltwater race, we had some problems down there, and after that race, we kind of gathered ourselves back together. Going into Syracuse, we thought we had a pretty good handle on things, but we got there, and right off the trailer, we run the boat a little bit, and within less than a lap, we ended up exploding a motor, sawing the boat in half, and things looked pretty bleak at that time, particularly in light of the fact that it was a Miller-sponsored event, and we wanted to do real well there, and to go home kind of with our tail between our legs was the low point of the entire season for us.
But the Miller American crew was not the only team to suffer major problems, as you see here in Heat 1A. Watch on the first lap on Onondaga Lake. You saw the starting line and you heard the gun. A good start by everybody, especially the man on the right of your screen, Jerry Hopp in the Aboyo Berta Beef Jerky, qualifying at 108 miles per hour. He's in first place and holding on to lane number 1. Executone Telephone second, and the 7-Eleven with Steve Reynolds in third place. Around the north turn, 7-Eleven has gone dead in the water down in the north turn. More problems for that turbine-powered boat. Reynolds waving that he's all right, but anyway, let's go back to the race. Aboyo Berto's still in first place with Jerry Hopp. One of the slower qualifiers, but running very well. Executone Telephone's on the left of your screen. That's the Kenny Toyota Volvo on the right. Look out, the boat's going to flip. The Kenny Toyota Volvo has flipped going down the back chute. Leif Borgeson, the driver. It looks like the boat has landed right side up. Let's locate the driver. There he is on the left of the boat, Leif Borgeson. The race has been stopped. The flares have been shot. As you see the red flag, the boats will return immediately to the pits. The Executone Telephone going back. Yes, the boat has landed right side up. The wing is virtually gone. The cockpit is gone. The rescue boat is now in place to pick up Leif Borgeson. We have no idea his condition at this point, and we will try to update you as soon as possible. Let's go back and try to get a better idea of what happened. Kenny Toyota Volvo on the right of the screen, behind the rooster tail of the Executone Telephones. The right spots and goes up into the air, and then that huge mass of air under the boat flips it over. They call it a blowover in unlimited hydroplane racing. The boat lands literally on its back and then bounces, landing upright where it came to rest. The driver, Leif Borgeson, 39 years old, making his return to Unlimited Hydroplane racing after 10 years on the beach, suddenly in the middle of a catastrophe. He surfaced on the left side of the boat, and as we said, we will get an update on his condition as soon as possible. The Syracuse rescue team working professionally and very quickly here on Onondaga Lake, bringing Leif Borgeson back to the dock. Here's Scott Pierce, the driver of the Executone telephones, consoling his wife, Jamie Pierce. You've got to remember, whenever there's an emergency like this, it affects the entire community of Unlimited Hydroplane racing. They're much like a family. Steve Reynolds, you see, over trying to get word. And the boat itself, the tips of the sponsons ripped away and is sinking. Here's Leif Borgeson being carried to the ambulance. And now today, as you can see, Leif Borgeson is in much better condition, with the exception of maybe some crutches. You're almost back to normal. What exactly were all the injuries you suffered?
Well, hitting the water that hard, Don, as you know, it's kind of like a brick wall. And I was ejected from the boat when it re-entered the water after the 360 flip. And I pretty much wiped out the forward part of the boat. And I had a tremendous amount of force pushed against my right leg, which dislocated the hip and tore a piece of the bone off at the top of the femur. And also it caused some nerve damage in the sciatic nerve, which has caused me some foot problems getting it working. But we're back on the mend now, and they did an operation back in Syracuse, and I'm out in Seattle, of course, and I'm going through physical therapy and that, and working real hard to physically come back. I feel a lot better now. It took a good probably a month before I really started to gain improvement as my health was concerned. I lost a lot of weight and had black eyes and all the normal stuff that happens to a boat racer when they fall out of one of their boats.
Okay. It was a dramatic moment, of course, in that race in Syracuse. We wondered, can we have good racing the rest of the day? What will happen? Well, it turns out he, too, was one of the best of the year. Let's watch. The principals, the Executone telephones, and the new Miss Budweiser. Here's the final lap. Look at this. Kropfeld holding on to lane number 2. You can hear the crowd in the background getting to see some wonderful racing as Kropfeld, a 5-time national champion in the limited level, driving the very famous Country Boy limited boat in the 225 cubic inch class. He's in first place now, ahead of Scott Pierce. He's still holding in lane number 2, however, so Scott Pierce has the lane if he can get the horsepower and the speed going down the back chutes to catch the Budweiser. There you see the rough ride on the part of the Budweiser. Things like that you won't see once it's dialed in a little bit better. Riding a little heavy on the sponsons, as we said earlier. The skid fin digging in. You see the Oboyo Berto. It is dead in the water in the south turn. The Budweiser having to go wide. Executone telephone on the inside, and now it's a sprint for the finish line. Executone telephones, lane number 1. The Bud in lane 2. Here comes the finish between Pierce and Kropfeld. It goes to the Budweiser, winner of E2A. Later, in the winner-take-all final, thunderstorms threatening the Syracuse area. The Bud in lane 1, Executone telephones lane 2, the 7-Eleven Steve Reynolds in lane 3. He is called for cutting off the Executone in the first turn. Coming out of that same turn, 7-Eleven in first place. It is ruled that Reynolds cut off the Budweiser as well, as the Bud went way up on the left sponson. Somehow, Jim Kropfeld, the driver of the Bud, was able to keep the engine running, and he was able to win the final heat, the first victory for the new Miss Budweiser in 1985. From central New York State, the circuit then moved west to the Motor City in 1985, race number 3, Detroit, Michigan. And there is where the Miller American really began its domination of 1985.
And it showed the way that the turbines, like the 7-Eleven and, of course, the Miller American, they showed the way that these boats, if they're going to compete, may all have to go turbine. That may be the trend. We don't know.
What about the water?
The Detroit River, well, it's supposed to be our most treacherous course, but this year, 1985, that's not so. We got all the action in on a given Sunday. We didn't get blown out till Monday like we did a couple of years ago.
Again, back to a most memorable moment. Certainly Leif Borgeson of the Kenny Toyota won't forget the blowover in Syracuse. But looking back over the summer, what was one of the highlights of his season?
The most exciting thing for me in this year was basically coming back into the sport after 10 years and winning the first heat. That was a real pat on the back, I thought, for my crew and owner.
So the 1985 Unlimited Hydroplane racing circuit continued. From Detroit down south to Madison, Indiana, a town rich in Unlimited Hydroplane racing tradition.
And the same Ohio River, and this guy right here, Steve Reynolds of the 7-Eleven, became the 4th different winner in our first 4 races. That wasn't too bad, Steve.
No, that was a real good win. You know, it had been about 6 races then since we'd won one, and the crew worked very hard. Very, very satisfying win. Anytime you can win on the Ohio River, you've done well.
Satisfying indeed. Reynolds in the 7-Eleven held off the Budweiser to win the final in Madison. The team's first win of 1985 and their first win since Houston last year. From there, the circuit moved south to Evansville, Indiana, and a great Heat 1A with the Budweiser and the 7-Eleven and the Miller American.
I'm with Jim Kropfeld now, the driver of Miss Budweiser, and one of the big events of the year was Evansville, Indiana, in the battle in Heat 1A between you and Steve Reynolds in the 7-Eleven. Do you recall that start?
Well, I sure do. That was probably the best start I had all season. Had the inside track, and I got to jump on Steve, especially with the turbine boat. And naturally, the drivers strive to get a perfect start, and I think that was a perfect one.
Good start on the part of the 7-Eleven and the Budweiser. Here comes the race. Where's the Miller American? In lane 2 and back a ways. The Budweiser in lane number 1. In lane 2 is the 7-Eleven. The Miller American is back a ways. Looks like they closed the door on him as they went into the turn. This 2-mile course in Evansville, Indiana. They come around the back chute. Look at this race. You've got Steve Reynolds on the outside, 7-Eleven, and the Budweiser with Jim Kropfeld going deck to deck down the back chute. Third place, Miller American and Chip Hanauer. Jim Kropfeld trying to keep Steve Reynolds out on his hip. The Budweiser in first place, coming around to complete lap number 1. You saw the 7-Eleven coming around the outside, and here's the lead for the Budweiser, and Jim Kropfeld against Steve Reynolds and the Miss 7-Eleven.
Good start is right, Jim, and we've had a lot of exciting starts from you and the Budweiser crew and battles from the 7-Eleven. Right now, let's throw it back to Don Poier. Don?
Jim, right now I am with Jim Saddam, the owner of the U-22, the Risley's Express. Evansville, Indiana, Heat 1B, an incredible start. Jim, remember that?
Oh, yeah. Todd had been having trouble with his watch all day and was off a little bit. He was in with the other 2 boats going for the start, and the crew chief, we put radios in our boats this year, and they paid off several times, but that particular time, the crew chief started holding him back with a radio, and Todd wasn't sure about his watch, so he listened to him, and he hit the start right on the button.
Let's go back and take a look at Heat 1B.
Executone and Madison jumped the gun in first position.
That was crew chief Kenny Walker explaining to his driver Todd Yarling that this boat, Executone Telephones, the current national point leader, had jumped the gun along with American Speedy Printing. The green flag on the final lap indicated so. So Todd Yarling and the U-22 and his crew going crazy on the dock had won their first heat in 1985. The Risley's Express, the U-22. Todd Yarling out of Madison, Indiana.
Just had official word. Both the Executone Telephone and the American Speedy Miss Madison did jump. You weren't in second, my man. You're first.
Oh, man, it's been a long time since last year. That's great.
Why is your wife crying?
I just don't know. Oh.
They work so hard she can hardly talk.
But at the end of the day, the checkered flag went to this man, Chip Hanauer and the Miller American. His second victory in 3 races and was the first of a long string of victories in 1985. The Miller American, a winner in Evansville, Indiana. 5 races were history, 4 remaining, and the national points race was ever so close. Executone Telephone still on top, but the Miller American was working its way up to the top of the list. Time for another memorable moment, this time with boat owner Jim Saddam.
I reckon the greatest moment this year, the Gold Cup was fantastic, but that heat win in Evansville, after all the problems we had, was just unexplainable.
Welcome back to our look at 1985 in the world of Unlimited Hydroplane racing. I'm Don Poier along with Jim Hendrick. Off we go again.
Yes, we headed west then, TriCities, Washington, Columbia River, where we established the fastest lap ever in the history of Unlimited Hydroplane racing.
Running it faster than 200 miles per hour in the straightaway, the boat qualified at 153 before runner damage caused the boat to veer to the left. The damage was not severe. They raced on Sunday.
Yeah, it was difficult. That's the fastest I've ever run, and it really took a lot more concentration than I've ever experienced. It made a tough situation really difficult when the rudder came off. It could have been disastrous.
I don't think any of us expected a boat to ever go 150 miles per hour. Jim?
Down the Tri-Cities race also marked the return of the Squire Shop Britannia racing team. Tommy Deeth, the driver. Tommy, specifically, I can remember Heat 1B, and you were in a real Donnybrook there.
That's for sure. I was right between the Miller American and the Executone, kind of like the rock and the hard place, but the Squire Shop Britannia came through, and we did a credible job, and we're a top team.
Now let's take a look at Heat 1B, Tri-Cities, the boat in the middle, Lane 2, Tommy Deeth, and the Squire Shop Britannia.
All four boats are now running here for Heat 1B as they come down the straightaway. On the far right is Executone telephones. There's the Squire Shop Britannia. The Executone, 6 seconds, 5, 4. They can't cross the starting line until time expires. Look out! Right on the button, 3 different boats. Miller American on the outside as they come rumbling into that first turn. Executone telephones in lane number 1. Squire Shop Britannia, lane number 2, and the Miller American turbine engine on the outside. Tom Deeth and the Squire Shop holding on to first place, battling Chip Hanauer going down the back chute. The Miller American with some 4,000 horsepower holding back maybe just a little bit. This is the first time Chip has been competing after having the rudder repaired a couple of times during testing and qualifying earlier in the week. Chip Hanauer on the outside, the Miller American, 3-time Gold Cup winner. Tom Deeth, a winner here in 1976 in the Gold Cup. In fact, Chip won here last year when the Gold Cup was held in Tri-Cities. 3 boats going around at lap number 1. Executone on the inside. In lane number 2, the Squire Shop Britannia with Tom Deeth and Chip Hanauer on the outside in the Miller American. Lap speed, 130.5 miles per hour for the Squire Shop in first place after lap number 1. Executone telephones dropping back just a bit in lane number 1. It's turning into a 2-boat race now down the back chute. The piston engine of the Squire Shop Britannia in its first race of 1985, going against Chip Hanauer on the outside in the red and white and gold boat. Third place, Scotty Pierce, the national point leader. Here on lap number 2, it's still Chip Hanauer with a slight lead on the outside. Leaving a lane now, he must leave plenty of room for Tom Deeth to come around to hug the buoy. And what a job he's doing driving. Look at Tom Deeth, hold on to lane number 1. Bob Stile on the left, Jim Harvey, the crew chief on the right. Stile, the owner of this boat, in first place, the Squire Shop Britannia. Miller American Chip Hanauer just staying on the outside hip of Tom Deeth. Scotty Pierce, third place. Still the Squire Shop. Tom Deeth, who drove for Bob Stile on the Squire Shop back in 1982 when Chip Hanauer left the Squire Shop and went to work for Jim Lucero and Fran Muncy. Then it was the Atlas Van Lines camp. Now it's the Miller American. Third place still is the Executone Telephones. Fourth place, Jerry Hott and the Oboyo Birdo. Going down the back chute, the turbine on the outside, the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, the piston engine on the inside, and the Squire Shop Britannia. The Miller American eventually got the win in Heat 1B, Squire Shop Britannia second. And in the final on this record-breaking day, the 7-11 and the Miller took turns setting records, and they met one more time, that in the final. The 2 turbine boats in the center of your screen as they head into the east turn. The Miller American in first place with Chip Hanauer. On the outside of him is the 7-11 and Steve Reynolds flying into that turn. Getting into the backstretch first is the Miller American and Chip Hanauer. On the outside of him, behind his rooster tail, is the 7-11 turbine-powered boat. The Miller American and the 7-11 with identical engines. The Squire Shop Britannia is in third. Fourth place, the Budweiser. And again, back to Chip Hanauer heading into the west turn. Here on lap number 1 of the final. The 20th straight year they've raced in the Tri-Cities area. The winner last year in this race, of course, Chip Hanauer when it was the Gold Cup. And right now he's got a lead. Oh, he flies going through that turn. And look who's starting to pull on him. The 7-Eleven and Steve Reynolds cutting down the lead as he comes down the main straightaway, completing lap number 1. A lot of air getting under the 7-Eleven. Speed for the Miller American, lap number 1. Almost 139 miles per hour. Third place still belongs to the Squire Shop Britannia. The Budweiser going dead in the water here on lap number 1. Jim Kropfeld's day is over. But back to the matter at hand, the turbine boats. We've been waiting all day for this matchup between Reynolds and Chip Hanauer. Hanauer with a slight lead now going down the back chute. The Miller American in first place. Again into the turn, you see the skid fin digging in, the water flying high into the air and on the outside. The 7-Eleven, but it's slowing down. Again, problems plaguing the 7-Eleven here on lap number 2 of the final in the Columbia Cup for 1985. Chip Hanauer is now way out in front as the 7-Eleven and Steve Reynolds slowly come to a rest in the Western, the same place he came to rest during Heat 2A in their first matchup. And get this, speed on lap number 2 for the Miller American, 143.1 miles per hour. Earlier he ran 141. He has already broken his own record. A third record now set by the Miller American and Chip Hanauer today. What a day for the Miller American. In second place now is Tom DeHeath and the Squire Shop Britannia. In third place is the Cellular One and Todd Yarling out of Madison, Indiana. The Miller American went on for the victory, its second straight and third out of 4 races, and already in second place in the national points race, with Executone Telephone still on top. Time for another memorable moment, this time with Jim Lucero, co-owner of the Miller American.
The best moment of our entire season had to be the 153-mile-an-hour lap in Tri-Cities. Not so much because of the number, but because we had tried some different things and they actually worked. And that is the key to working on the boat, is making things like that happen.
Great racing, Tri-Cities, Washington, and the Columbia River. Great speeds, good competition. And then the Thunderboat Tour moved a little farther west.
We went across the mountains into western Washington, Seattle, Washington. And of course, the big one of the year, as it is every year, the APBA Gold Cup. And what a day it was.
Another big moment, 1985 Gold Cup, Seattle, Heat 1A, the roughest ride you've ever had, right?
Jim, I've never seen water any rougher than Seattle was, and it was something we didn't anticipate. Seattle traditionally gets tough, but not quite that bad. You know, we didn't know how bad the damage was to the 7-Eleven until we brought her back to the dock and lifted her up, and it was pretty extensive.
Steve Reynolds, the driver, he was there. He knows, and he won that Heat 1A in the Gold Cup. Don?
Chip Hanauer, going into that Gold Cup, you were trying to go for your 4th straight. I remember saying you probably are putting a lot of pressure on yourself, but you felt a little on the outside, too.
I did. When the Gold Cup was over and winning the 4th straight, more than anything, I felt a feeling of relief. And it has only been since now, weeks after the Gold Cup, that I really can appreciate and enjoy really what we accomplished.
Let's take a look at the final, the 1985 Gold Cup.
We're under 5 seconds for the start. The 7-Eleven, the Budweiser, Executone, all 3 together at the start. On the way outside is the Miller American. Chip Hanauer trying to make some history, trying to be the first man in modern history to win 4 straight Gold Cups. But right now in lane number 1 is the 7-Eleven, in lane number 2, the Budweiser. Lane 3, Executone Telephones. This is Steve Reynolds going into the entrance buoy. Heading into that south turn, he has first place. Let's see if he can hold on to it now as he goes into the back chute. Reynolds and the 7-Eleven holding on to first. Steve Reynolds trying to run away from the Miller American, and Chip Hanauer. He now has the larger engine in there. There's Hanauer on his outside shoulder. It's the 2 turbines, the 7-Eleven against the Miller going into the north turn. Steve Reynolds trying to break that string set by Chip Hanauer, who has already won 3 straight Gold Cups, winning last year in the Tri-Cities area. Chip Hanauer coming around, the 7-Eleven is going dead in the water. Steve Reynolds' day is over in the north turn. Mechanical problems for the 7-Eleven. What a hard heartbreak for Steve Woomer, the owner, Steve Reynolds, the driver. The Budweiser and Jim Kropfeld is also coming to rest in the back chute here in Seattle. The attrition rate going sky high suddenly here in the final. So now, Chip Hanauer, with his destiny really in his own hands, in first place. Executone Telephones in second place in the final for the Budweiser Gold Cup. Third place belongs to Todd Garling in the Cellular One. Chip Hanauer now going down the back chute. As you see Steve Reynolds walking along the deck of the 7-Eleven in the foreground. He is finished. He'll have to watch the rest of the race from the north turn. Executone Telephone with Scotty Pierce in second place. But Hanauer, who ran the first lap at 127 miles per hour, is now on his second. The 7-Eleven crew, oh, they've got to be disappointed. Nancy Sadam, the wife of the owner of the Cellular One, cheering on Todd Yarling. There's their boat, currently in third place. What a great finish that would be for that boat. Cellular One and Yarling went on to get third place. Executone Telephone second, but Miller American, Chip Hanauer got their fourth straight Gold Cup, and more importantly, moved out on top of the national points race. Time for another memorable moment with Chip Hanauer.
I think the most memorable thing for me about 1985 is coming to Washington down on points and coming out of it with a 153-mile-an-hour lap, my fourth straight Gold Cup and 2 wins.
Hello again, everybody. I'm Don Poier, along with Jim Hendrick. We're here in San Diego, site of the last race of 1985. After the Seattle Gold Cup, it was time to hit the road again.
Yeah, we went down to cowboy country because that's the first time the state of Oklahoma has ever seen a thunderboat, and we had a good time. This guy right here, Andy Coker, locked up in a pretty good battle with, of course, Jim Kropfeld and Budweiser. That had to be exciting.
Excellent. We noticed they were running without the rear wing. We decided to dial a little more into it, and we went for it. That's what we needed to get in the final, and we were trying with everything we had.
And let's take a look at that action.
Boy, what a strange sight, the Budweiser without that tail. There's the Jackie Cooper Cellular One with Todd Yarling out of Madison, Indiana. Looks like it'll be a good start, all 4 boats running. Bud moving up into contention now for the start. You heard the gun, and here they come down into the south turn. American Speedy Printing in lane number 1 with Andy Coker. The 37-year-old holding on to that lane and trying to fend off the Budweiser as they'll now go down the back chute. American Speedy Printing in first place. Looks like the Budweiser in lane number 2 and second with Jim Kropfeld out of Cincinnati, Ohio. Great acceleration by American Speedy Printing. Keep in mind, yes, the Budweiser is not at full speed. That boat about 500 pounds heavy anyway on the front sponsons, and now without the wing to help. Got to be a tough time for Kropfeld, but here's Andy Coker holding on to first place. From the north turn, American Speedy Printing swinging a little wide, trying to make the Budweiser go even wider as they come down the main straightaway for the first time, completing lap number 1. The Budweiser again without that wing. The enclosed cockpit for Jim Kropfeld in second place in the Bud. First place, American Speedy, Andy Coker. Speed for American Speedy, 114.2 miles per hour. And the Jackie Cooper Cellular One in third place. Andy Coker is running away from the field. What a job of driving. I'm sure Andy wants to improve after clipping a buoy back in the earlier heat. Coker in first place for American Speedy Printing. Down in that rough water in the south turn where the wind goes into the shore and really makes the water very, very rough. But American Speedy, the only conventional boat remaining. This used to be a world championship boat back in the early 70s. Battle for third and fourth, the Coors Silver Bullet on the right of your screen in fourth place. Third place, Jackie Cooper's Cellular One. And back to first place, Andy Coker trying to run away from the other 3 boats and possibly pick up 400 points. Despite the great battle by Andy Coker and American Speedy Printing, the Budweiser with Jim Kropfeld went on to get the victory. Later in the day, another man was driving incredibly fast.
Back again with Steve Reynolds of the 7-Eleven. When I think of Oklahoma City, I remember you said, gosh, it's really choppy early in the day, then it smoothed out, and you ran an average speed in one heat of 132 miles per hour.
Well, that's kind of uncharacteristic for me, but the boat performed so well, Don, and, you know, we ran against the Miller, and it was the first time we'd really had him one-on-one when both of us were running great. It was a real satisfying feeling to go around there at an average of 132. I mean, I was smiling the whole way. It was a great feeling.
Then came the final of the day. The 7-Eleven trying to prevent the Miller American from winning its 4th consecutive race. And here it came. There's the gun, and here we go with the final in Oklahoma. The Miller American first into the turn, Chip Hanauer. On the inside, however, is the Budweiser, as you see the Miller here with a slight lead. Chip Hanauer going around this first turn. There's the Budweiser on the right of your screen. Look at the acceleration on the part of the Miller American. What happened to the 7-Eleven? A bad start for Steve Reynolds. I'm sure he would like to have it over again. The Budweiser in second place. Miller American first. Chip Hanauer going after victory number 4 in a row. 5 out of the last 6 races in 1985. Coming around the outside now, Steve Reynolds moving into second place in the 7-Eleven, passing the Bud. Todd Yarling and the Jackie Cooper. Speed for the Miller American, lap number 1, 134.9 miles per hour. The Bud on the right. And there's the Miller American with that Lycoming turbine engine. The Miller American. Totally oblivious to the choppy water there in the north turn as he comes down the main straightaway. Chip Hanauer speed, again, 134 miles per hour. And remember, he's driving with that bad rudder. The 7-Eleven, look out, the turbine engine has exploded. Steve Reynolds appears to be all right, but the boat is going dead in the water. The 7-Eleven blowing out the hot section, it appears, on this 7-Eleven turbine engine. You see some flame in there. Steve waving that he is all right. But a lot of smoke coming out of that engine chamber. The race was stopped after that explosion, but it was later ruled that the Miller American was credited with the victory. Chip Hanauer's 4th straight and the first victory ever in the state of Oklahoma. Despite the victory by Hanauer and company, the World Championship was still not sealed. The Executone Telephone going into the last race of the year in San Diego still had a shot at winning the title. And while we have a moment, we want to thank our partners in racing in 1985, the Mercury Champ Boat Series, which virtually took us all over the world, to Europe, to the continent of Africa, and many, many race sites throughout the United States. These boats that travel up to 140 miles per hour on the straightaway put on a fabulous show in 1985, and we thank them for their participation in joining us in our broadcasts this season.
The fondest memory I have of the 85 season is having Art and Dorothy Alberto feed us lunch every day at noon out here at the race course.
Welcome back to our look at 1985 and Unlimited Hydroplane Racing. And Don, our last race of the year was in San Diego, California.
It was so enjoyable down in Oklahoma City, and then what a great place to end it all, right here in San Diego. Right now, a chance to talk with Jerry Hopp, driver of the Poier Oberto, which has been a picture of consistency, really, in 1985, Jerry.
Yes, well, the last 2 years, since we've owned this boat, we've completed 34 of the 36 heats that we're in, and the boat is running 3 miles an hour faster this year than it did last year, and we're just improving a little step at a time. We have 2 really fine young men on the crew, and our crew chief, Al Thorson, the veteran.
Well, good luck to you in 1986.
Thank you.
Then came the race for the World Championship, and it didn't take very long for the Miller American to take it all. After Heat 1A, the Miller American, with its victory, had an insurmountable lead over the rest of the field, and they took the title.
We're here with the national champion after Heat 1A in San Diego, Chip Hanauer. And by the way, that is the first time in Unlimited history that a turbine-powered boat has won a national title. Chip, congrats.
Thank you. We're real proud. With whatever happens now, we've got the championship sewed up, and that's what we wanted to do, is come, run conservatively, get the championship sewed up, and then we can go for broke in the final.
Now have fun the rest of the day.
Yeah, this is going to be the first time I think I've been able to really enjoy a race, and no matter what happens now, it's been a good year.
The Miller won the World Championship with the Budweiser. The boat with the big golden A on its tail had the final say of the year, winning in San Diego. And this is how the points will go into the record book for 1985. The Miller American getting the title, Executone fighting very hard all year, leading much of the year in second place. Then the Budweiser, the 711 Oboy Oberto, American Speedy Printing, and the Miss Pride Air, Todd Yarling the driver. Other boats in 1985, the Squire Shot Britannia, 2,000 points in just 2 races. The Coors Light Silver Bullet, Kenny Toyota Volvo, and Domino's Pizza.
Well, my real fast best memory, of course, had to be our win in Syracuse, but almost tied to that was Steve Woomer in the 711 winning in Madison, Indiana. That really turned me on.
There's so many people that let me do this that I'm really undeserving, and I just feel really privileged.
So the 85 season is over, and we look to the future. What do some of the principals in Unlimited Hydroplane Racing plan for 1986?
Don, as you know, the turbines are running away with the sport, it seems like. We want to improve. We started out with a 5-year program to win a race in 5 years, and we're still aiming at that. Next year, we'll probably go turbocharged, pick up another 6-8 mile an hour, and impress the sponsor well enough that maybe we can get in the turbine fight along about 87 or so.
Well, of course, in 1986, we have to go to the 2,600 horse motors, which is going to cost us about 1,100 horsepower over what we have this year. I anticipate for the Miller American, we're going to see a brand new race boat in 1986, and we'll make some aerodynamic and hydrodynamic adjustments, probably some more development in our propeller area, and try to give Chip Hanauer a little more competitive ride.
One man looking for bigger and better things in 86 is Bernie Little, and how are you going to improve, Bern?
Well, Jim, we sure did a lot of experimenting in 85, and we found out what we wanted to know. We've accomplished the safety we wanted for our driver. We dedicated that for safety. Now in 86, we're going for the checker flag. As you know, we got a new turbine boat that's running fantastic. We've done a lot of experimenting with the Griffin this year. We're ready to go, and we just really hope we might have 2 boats out there.
So that's it for 1985, an incredible year. For the first time in history, the national champion, the Miller American, a turbine-powered boat. What a year, Jim.
It just whets my appetite, Don, for 1986. More race sites, more power changes. Don't know what to expect, but we're going to be there.
Absolutely. 1986 just around the corner for Jim Hendrick and Don Poier. So long.
Air transportation provided by Continental Airlines, the official carriers of Unlimited Hydroplane Racing. A promotional fee has been paid by Hertz Penske Truck Rentals. Scuba diving equipment is provided by Nemrod, the official suppliers of the Unlimited Racing Commission. Hydroplanes 85, a year in review, has been brought to you by Ford and your local Ford dealer, and by the new Napa Advantage muffler. It puts rust at a disadvantage. Keep up to date with the Unlimited Hydroplanes by calling the Hydro Hotline at 1-900-410-5500. If you'd like to purchase a VHS video cassette of this program, send a check or money order for $19.95 to the Unlimited Racing Commission, 901 Occidental South, Seattle, Washington, 98134.